So this is question 1 for May-June 2022, 9618 variant 4.1, and we'll be looking at the Python implementation. So let's go ahead and look at the question here. So for this one, we are making use of this text file called highscore.txt. And if I come to my project structure here, you see that I have the highscore text file going on here. And these are the contents of the text file as it were. So I close the question there. All right. So here we are told that the text file highscore.txt stores the name, the players who have scored the top 10 scores in a game in descending order of score. The file stores the 3-character name of the player and their integer score in the order player score. For instance, here's an example right here, and of course we can just go ahead and open the file, and you see that this is the structure that we were going on there. You can actually see that the numbers, they are descending there, and you can also see the 3-letter names for the players as they highlighted there in the question paper. So here we are given these requirements that the program is going to read in the data from highscore.txt. It's going to allow the users to enter a new name in their score. If appropriate, insert the new player name and score into the top 10. Then it's going to write the top 10 players' name and score into a new text file called new highscore.txt. So here we are to write the solution for part A first. So it says here that the program stores the players and their scores in an array of 11 elements, 10 elements to be read from the file, 1 element to be inserted by the user. So write a program to declare one or more arrays as global data structures to store the player names and their scores. So let's go ahead and look at the implementation that I have going on here. So here on lines 2 and 3, I actually have the global arrays that are rather lists in Python that we are going to be making use to store the names and the scores. So what I did on line number 2, the variable or the name for the list that's going to be holding the names, it's actually going to be of size 11, is it? So what I'm doing here is I'm actually using this notation in Python, whereby let's say if you want your list to have 11 elements, like in this case, you simply multiply the list by 11, like what I'm doing right there on line number 2 there. Then of course we are just setting it to hold the value none. So essentially the list is just going to be having now values as it were. Then for the scores, we are just setting it to we are defaulting to 0 for the player scores. So of course these are the two lists that we'd actually need for our program, and you would actually go ahead and copy this code and paste it inside of your evidence document as it were. Then on part B, we have a procedure called read highscores, and it's going to open the file highscore.txt and raise the data into the data structures that we declared in part 1 earlier. So we have to write program code to declare the procedure called read highscores. So here we're just going to be reading data from our file into our global variables, or into our global arrays as it were, or list rather. So I have the implementation for part B right there on 6 to line 6 through 18, and line 6 we have the function definition there. Then on line number 7 we are now telling the Python interpreter that we are making reference to the global lists called player names and player scores. Then we are using exception handling on lines 8, 15 and 17 in the event that we fail to find our file as it were. So that's why we have that try except block going on. Then inside of the try block, we are opening the file on line number 9 there in read mode. You can see that the error notation there, or the error parameter there, that's read, and we are simply calling our file in this case. So file here is just the variable name that we'll be making use to highscore.txt as it were. Then on line number 10, we are making use of a for loop to iterate through the player names list as it were. So what we are doing, we want our loop to run 10 times, and the way we are going about it is we are going to check to read the current line inside of the file, then we strip off any trailing spaces, then we store that inside of the player names list at the current index position. So remember, I is actually going to assume values from 0 to 9, is it? So which is actually 10 times if you think about it, because remember the range function is going to run up to but not including this term, this value that we have there. So it's actually going to run from 0 to 9, as it were. So for the first time around, it's going to store the name on 0, index position 0, then index position 1, and so forth and so on. Then we are also going to do the same thing for the score. What we are doing on line 12 is we are reading a line, reading the next line rather, from the file and stripping off any trailing spaces. Then we are putting that inside of this variable called score line. So we want to check to see if the current score line is not empty. So if it is not empty, then we are going to convert or to typecast that score into an integer, then store it inside of this player scores list at the current index position, just as we did with the player name. So for the name, if the name is FYI, like in the question there, it will be stored inside of the player names list. Then for the score, which will be on the second line, which is 10,000. Remember, it will be a string, is it? So we need to convert it into an integer. So that's what we are doing on line 14 there. So this loop is going to do this for all the names that we have inside of the file. Then of course the exception handling is going to allow us to handle situations whereby either we don't find the file, in which case we notify the user, and in such a case where we fail to convert the format for the score into an integer, we are going to print a value error exception right on line 18. So of course you'd go ahead and copy the code and paste it inside of your evidence document. Then moving on to C, we have the procedure called output high scores, which outputs all the values in the data structures in the format. So this is the format right there. So we are going to have the player and the score. Then on the next time we have the player and the score. So we need to do this for the elements in the data structures that we just populated in part B. So we are going to write program code for output high scores. So I have that going on between lines 21 and 25 there. So on line 21 we have the function definition output high scores. Then on line 22 we are telling the Python interpreter that we are making reference to the player names and player scores lists, global variables that we declared in lines 2 and 3. You can see that we are using the global keyword there, is it? So that's what it means. Then of course we are using a for loop that's going to run 10 times for the number of player names and scores that we have inside of our list, as it were. So if we are checking to see if the player name is not none, so remember, if the player name is none, it means that there's no score. There's not going to be an associated score. It's an empty slot, as it were. So on line 24, we're just checking to see if the current index position is not none. So in that case, it means we definitely have something to print. So we move on to line 25 there, where we are f printing. So we are going to f print the player name of the current index, as well as the player score in the current index. Then of course you would go ahead and copy this code and paste it inside of your evidence document. Then the main program should first call read high scores and then output high scores. So we have to write program code for the main program. So let's go ahead and look at the main program down here. So with the definition for the main program, so here you see that we are just outputting, rather we're just printing that we are reading high scores. Then we call read high scores. Then we also print that we are going to be outputting the current high scores. Then we output the high scores. So this is the implementation for part D item 1. And you go ahead and copy the code and paste it inside of the evidence document. On line number 2, we need to test our program and take a screenshot of the output. So maybe what I can do in this instance, since I already have it going on for the entire solution, I would actually just comment out, rather let me just run it like that. So here you see that this is for the later part of the question. We have the current high scores and we're just outputting them like that. Then it said that we should take a screenshot of the output and paste it into the evidence document. So you'd actually go ahead and copy this output right here and paste it inside of your evidence document. Take a screenshot and paste it inside of the evidence document. Right, so let me just come back to the terminal and perform a keyboard interrupt. Right, just without the console there. So coming back to part E, it says here that the main program needs to ask the user to input a new player name and the score. If this score is in the top 10, then it will create a new top 10 list that includes this score. So we have to amend the main program to ask the user to input a 3-character player name and an integer score that must be between 1 and 100,000 inclusive. So let's go ahead and do this right here, or rather show you what I did. So we are amending. This is E item 1, so this is the solution that I'm going on here. So on line 65, I'm prompting the user to enter the new player details. So on line 67, we are using a while loop to validate the input. So this loop is going to perpetually prompt the user to input a 3-letter name, as it were. So if your name is not 3 letters, you are going to be keep on prompted to input a 3-letter name, as it were. So on line 68, we tell the user that they should enter a 3-character player name. Then we are stripping off any trailing spaces. Then if the new player name, which we held in this new player name variable right there, is equal to 3, then we can break out of the loop. Otherwise, you are going to keep or stay inside of the loop, as it were. Then we also need to validate the score. So we have that with that try except block, we have the value error exception going on because in the event that we fail to typecast from an integer from a string into an integer, then we can print the value error there. So again, we are using an infinite loop that we can only break out of if we provide the correct conditions or the correct required values, as it were. So on line 75, with this new player score going on, and we are using method chaining on line 75. So we are chaining the int and the input functions together. So we should enter a player score that is between 1 and 100,000. Then if it is, if the new player score is less than or equal to the, rather if it is greater than or equal to 1, then we can, greater than or equal to 1, but also less than or equal to 100,000, then we can break out of that particular loop. And what we are doing then on line 78 is we still tell the user that we are expecting a value that is between 1 and 100,000, so they will stay inside of that until they provide a valid score, as it were. So of course we'll go ahead and copy the code and paste it inside of the evidence document. Then we are to write program code to declare a procedure that takes the player name and score as parameters. Then it's going to create a new top 10 list that includes the parameter if appropriate. So let's go ahead and look at E item 2, the implementation that I have going on here. For E item 2, where's my E item 2? I can't seem to locate my E item 2. Wait, let me see. The procedure that takes the player name and scores as parameters creates a new top 10. Alright, maybe yeah, that's the one that I have called in set. I have it right here, right there. It's actually supposed to be E item 2, not E item 3, right there. So let me just fix that real quick. So I'm calling this one insert new score function. So that's the name of the procedure. Then on line 28 with the procedure definition, and it's going to take 2 parameters. So here it says that program code to declare a procedure that takes the player name and score as parameters. So that's what we are doing on line 28 there. We are going to take the new player name and the new player score. And then we are making reference to the player names and player scores lists globals. Then on line 30, we want to add new entry at the end of the list. So we are simply going to append the new player name and the new player score at index position 10, as it were. Then we are using a bubble sort because remember it's going to create a new top 10 list that includes the parameter if appropriate, is it? And what we can actually do is we are going to check to see if we are using a bubble sort basically. Right? So what we're doing here is we're checking to see if the player score that was provided is greater than the one that is on the next position, is it? So here we are just checking to see if the current value is greater than the next value, in which case it means that we need to swap the elements. So here we are performing a standard bubble sort, which is one of the algorithms that you should be able to implement by heart for this particular course. So that's what we are doing between lines 35 and 42 there. Then after which we simply have the sorted list as it were. So that's what this function requires us to do. We provide the parameters, then we create a new list that includes the parameters if appropriate, and that we can only achieve after having sorted or having compared if the new values are worth storing inside of the new list as it were. Then for D item, rather E item 3, we need to amend the main program to call the procedure from part 2. So coming back to the solution here, we have here we insert and show before and after. So here we have we are printing before insertion, then we call output high scores. Then we are going to insert a new score with the new player name and the new player score variables. Then after insertion, we are going to output the high scores as it were. So after that, we can go ahead and copy the code and paste it inside of the evidence document. Then coming back to item number 4, we are to test our program by entering these names. So we have JKL and 9999. Then we are going to take a screenshot of the output. So let's go ahead and pull up the terminal. Let me just bring this down a little bit so that we can see these test data. So we can run our program here. So here we are supposed to implement, or rather to input JKL. So that's there. Then the score is supposed to be 9999. And then we hit enter. So you immediately see that these values, since they are valid, they've been inserted on as the second entry inside of what? Inside of our player names and player scores list as it were, and we're outputting them right here, is it? So you can see the before and you can see the after right here. So of course you go ahead and copy the take a screenshot of the output and paste it inside of the evidence document. Then on part F, we have the procedure called write top 10, which stores the new top 10 player names and scores in a text file called new high score .txt. So this one is just going to write our top 10 to a file, right? That's what we need to do. So let's go ahead and look at the implementation that I have going on here. It's just before the main method, right there on line 44. So we have the function definition on line 44, then we are making reference to the player names and player scores lists. Then we have a try except block going on there, with the exception being an input output error if we fail to create the text file. So what I did for my text file was to call it, since I already have a new score 1.txt file, I can actually change this to new high score 2.txt, so that you can actually see that I'm actually creating the file right here. So we are going to open this file. Remember, the W parameter means that if the file does not exist, it's going to be created, is it? So we are simply going to be unpacking the names from the lists and writing them to the file, is it? So this is going to happen for all the 10 entries that we have going on inside of the player names and player scores list right there on lines 50 and 51. You can actually see that we're writing the name followed by the score, then the name followed by the score, and this is going to happen 10 times for each of these two lists as it were. And after doing that, we can go ahead and copy this code and paste it inside of the evidence document. Then are we required to? Alright, maybe what we can do, we can just go ahead and test to see that this works, is it? Of course, we already know that it works because we did see it earlier on. Just run it one more time, and we'll open the file explorer here. So you notice we don't have a file called new high score 2.txt, is it? So the moment I run this script, and maybe let me just insert a new value, rather let's just insert that JKL and 9999, then we hit enter. So immediately you see that we now have this new high score 2.txt file going on. and you can actually see our entry like right there on lines 3 and 4. So that's the implementation for question 1. I'll see you in the solution for question 2.